Betting show hosted by a former statistics professor. This is your host, Professor Sides, and we are here to discuss college basketball for Thursday, November 20th, 2025. Before we get started, quick reminders of how it works. You will hear me reference the mathematical predictive probability models that I have created. Those are called Sideline. They are player-based. So every rating reflects today's roster that matters for injuries mainly. And at the start of the season, again, it gives us a little bit of insight into certain teams based off the fact that it does have all the transfer data, stuff like that. So it's not just relying on team stats from last year, for instance. Higher implies more points. So offenses want to be higher, defenses want to be lower. They are predictive and forward facing, so it doesn't necessarily always align with the exact results you've seen based off if teams have been lucky or unlucky. And of course, the pick grades are based on the probabilistic edge at the time of post. A, B, and C, love, like, and lean. And if you want to get that information for every single game, Patreon is the place to be there. Again, we emphasize value, how things play out in the long run. We are not trying to say that we are going to be able to predict what will happen in any of these games. And a reminder to you folks, you cannot either, and no one else can either, unless you've got some inside information, and then the Fibbies go on and talk to you there. So we're going to assume that's not us here, fortunately and unfortunately. And so without that inside information, right, we have to view these things probabilistically, and that means we want to make sure that our mindset and our language is all about understanding uncertainty and understanding the fact that we think that there might be a little bit of an edge here. We think we're getting a little bit of value here. And you could disagree with that. Say we think there's a little bit of value on the other side. That's perfectly fine. The idea, though, is that there are no locks. There are no sure things. There is no this is going to happen, right? Because that sort of language implies probabilities much closer to 100% than it is. It's nowhere beyond 40 to 60%, usually where we're sitting on any side here. That's a minus 110 proposition, right? And so we want to make sure that we are thinking about things in the correct mindset here. Because that's going to help make sure that we have good bankroll management properties, because we can't get too overconfident in something at 60% because we know the weatherman says 60% going to rain, and then it doesn't rain all the time, right? If you're interested in getting all that information, you can access our Discord chat with experts and other really smart bettors, insights, other picks, props, all sorts of goodies over there from other people, and access to ask me questions as well. The Discord chat is the place to be, and again, all that available on Patreon, the link in the show description. And if you are there with us already, again, we really appreciate your support, helping us keep the lights on and keep this show going. It is literally your support that makes that possible. Without it, we wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you so much. We're going to start off here with our spotlight game. According to Sideline, the most interesting game of the day. I have a little fun rating that I have with these, and it's a combination of how close do we think the game will be, how good quality with regards to how good the teams are, and how many points, because everyone likes more points, and this one gets the number one rating here for Thursday night. This game will take place in Kansas City, so a little bit of a neutral site, of course, but those games in Kansas City, the Wildcats tend to have a good following there, right? So I'm expecting a more pro-Kansas State crowd. We've already talked about this in a couple situations this season. Really short travel, under an hour drive from Manhattan to Kansas City. A drive I've actually done once when I was able to go to a football game there in Manhattan. Mississippi State, a little bit further travel. And so we're giving Kansas State about a half of a home court edge, an arena that they have played at before, at least for these players who were on the team last year. That's where they, have held, they play multiple, non-conference games there every so often, it seems like. And of course, the Big 12 tournament as well. But that's mostly irrelevant here, as we're going to not talk about the side, but instead go to the total, go over 161.5 as a B grade. The pace for this is going to be a little bit faster. Mississippi State, a little bit on the fast side. Kansas State, fairly much on the fast side. As you can see there on screen, that 117 is a full standard deviation faster than the typical college basketball team, ranks 54th. And on top of that, both these teams are better on offense than defense, especially Kansas State, who's given up 83 points to Tulsa already and 96 to Cal. Both those games at home, they give that many points. They've also scored plenty of points. They've scored in the 90s thrice already, and they scored their other game in the 80s. And so Kansas State, plenty of points. Mississippi State's only 1 and 2 to the over, but the two that didn't go over, they also were laying big numbers and didn't quite cover. sometimes those games where you're laying big numbers get weirder. And I don't necessarily mean that means they go under. It's just they get weirder. Houston, for example, is a team that tends to play lower scoring, grind out possession games, but then every once in a while they'll play a weaker team and they'll just kind of let it go out there and they'll let it roll and they'll fly over the total. They'll put up 100. In other games, they'll struggle to get the 50. They're holding their opponent to 40, right? So you just never know. Sometimes, of course, in those games, Houston only allows their opponent to 40, and so the game can get. You just never know with those weird mismatch games, right? So I'm not really reading too much of that. Mississippi State's game against Iowa State went over as well. So I think there's a lot of ways this goes over. It's a B grade according to the model. We're approaching A grade territory as our differential right now is 3.5 points. If that gets a little bit higher, that'd be A grade. So if this number drops into, you could chop around, get a better number, of course. Again, you're close to A grade territory, but I still think it's worth the play here. So I think this is more mid 160s, upper 160s on average territory. Again, one game, anything can happen, especially with totals. One team slows it and the team decides to go with it, right? So you just never know, of course. But in general, this game more likely to go over a number that's in the low 160s than it is under. So we like this over in our spotlight game, Mississippi State, Kansas State, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, a late night tip for you there. And again, a reminder of all the great information you can get over on Patreon includes all of those metrics: pace, offensive and defensive efficiency, win probabilities, all sorts of goodies. So we can check that out with the link in the show description. Expecting a high scoring, fun matchup there. For our grade A side of the day so far, the A grades on the show, 6, 4, and 1 on the season. And the models really liked Purdue so far, and I think it's been mostly right. That first game of the season, we laid a big number with Purdue. That got steamed up, and so depending on when you bet that, it might have hit or might not have hit, but the number we played it at got the win, and the number that it landed at was close to where the model said it should be. In fact, I think the number might have even gone too far. I think the model might have been even more accurate than the closing spread on that game. I'm not saying that means anything, just kind of pointing that out. They played really well against Alabama, obviously covered in that one. And then they had another game that they covered, I believe, at the opening number, early number, got steamed up a little bit. So kind of the same thing here I'm looking at. We're recording this Wednesday night, and laying 15 is an acre. It makes a lot of sense. I expect this to get bet up. What number they would cover, I mean, you never know. Purdue might just win this game by 10, doesn't matter. They might win this game by 25, it doesn't matter either. But there's a lot of times in here, especially when a number moves a decent bit, where that number is going to come into play at some point. And so this is why we always say, getting all of this information over on Patreon immediately, as soon as it's available, it can be very beneficial for you. Because you can make sure that you go ahead and grab good numbers, wait on numbers if you don't think they're as good as they could be, if there's not much value, right? See where the line movement goes. You never know exactly where a number's going to go, but I feel like Purdue tends to get bet up. Bigger favorites tend to get bet up. And when you look at whatever the heck happened with Memphis in that last game, UNLV double-digit favorites basically, losing by 14. I don't know what that was about. But this Memphis team clearly has some issues, and going up against this Purdue offense, boy, a scary, scary task. Sideline has Purdue dropped them to number 3 now, slightly behind Gonzaga. This feels a little bit like the Duke game, both Duke games that we've talked about, and we've covered both of them, where we just kind of thought, hey, Duke's really, really good. This number's just a little short. Both of those worked out for us. It's worked out for us a little bit backing Purdue here when we thought the number was a little short. Not necessarily saying every game, but this one, I think the number's a little bit short as Memphis, has been battle tested, has played maybe the toughest schedule so far in college basketball. They don't have a cupcake on their schedule, and just about everybody else has, one. Some teams already have 4 on their schedule. So kudos to them for playing real teams. Boy, I think this is going to be a really tough one. Neutral site contest, so it should be a lot of fun for the athletes and the staffs out there to enjoy the beach a little bit. But when it comes to getting on the court, Purdue should just be a massive mismatch. And we've got the model here saying they win by an average of about 20. So our grade A side of the day is laying 15 with the Boilermakers. For our best B total, we'll have our best B side later. The B grades on the show, 6 and 3 so far on the season. So looking really good to start off. We're going to go under 152.5 in the first game in Kansas City, New Mexico, and Nebraska. Not quite the same home edge for Nebraska, a little bit further travel, an arena that they typically play a little bit less at than Kansas State, but you could give them a slight smallish home edge just because it is further travel for New Mexico. But just as in the first game, we're actually going to avoid the side and instead take the total and go under 152.5 as a B grade in this one. And folks, to me, when I look at the results of these teams on the season, you've got Nebraska, who's played two just bonkers outlier games. They had that game against Oklahoma. Whoa, buddy. Went over by 42. They've also played a game that's gone under by 30. So let's just knock out the outliers and look at the other 6 games these teams have played. 3-3, 3 overs, 3 unders. And so you might say, oh, the market's seeing them correctly. Not so fast, my friend. UNM has had 2 of their games that have gone over go over by 3 points and 8 points, and Nebraska's other over game has gone over by 6. But the unders for New Mexico have been under by 16 and 14, while Nebraska's has been under by 14. So take out the outliers. These teams have gone over 3 times by an average of 5-6 points, and they've got under 3 times by an average of 15. And so what I'm saying there is I think there's some evidence that the market is a little bit high on the totals for both of these teams. And that's exactly what the model says here. The predicted score from the model is about 149, whereas the market's got 152.5. So again, just on average, we're just thinking it's maybe a little bit lower than the market's thinking. If I were to just look at the data for these games, those 6 games, I'm not saying we should do this, then it would indicate that we need to be even more under than the market by this. We're not going to overreact to 6 games because, unfortunately, 6 games weights in the model is, I'm going to make up a number here, about 15% or so of this total. There's a whole lot of other information that goes on, right, with historical information and coaches and pace and tendencies and the players and all sorts of other goodies. So it's not just about these 6 games. But again, we've got some evidence here that maybe they're a little bit lower scoring on average than the market's thinking, and that's what the model says too. And so when I see those aligned like that, it seems to make sense. Be great here for the under there in the early game in Kansas City, and a game that the pace should be very run-of-the-mill. Nebraska, a fairly balanced team. And again, why another good reason for this go under, New Mexico's defense, much better than their offense. So when you say average pace, solid balanced team on one side, but one team with a much better defense and offense, again, all the ingredients are here for this to hang more in the 140s than get in the 150s. And so it's what makes us like this as our best B total of Thursday. Our grade A total today will be Bucknell at St. John's. We're going to go over 154.5. Average game in this one, according to Sideline, is 160 points. So we're going to go over, again, 154.5. This one, to me, boils down to 2 things. Because there's really not much to talk about X's and O's in this game, I think. Everyone knows St. John's is a much better team. They're massive favorites. Everyone knows St. John's wants to play fast and score as many points as possible. Bucknell's going to be a little bit slow. I mean, you can see it on the screen on the metrics. I think we already kind of know that. There's not really an interesting angle there. What I think this is about is St. John's has played 2 weird games that have not come anywhere near the total. They just played William & Mary in a game that had a total of about 180 that laid it in the 150s. And they played Quinnipiac, had a total in the 150s that landed at 180. And so when I see that, I think, okay, St. John's high variance team, right? If they're getting you going at a higher pace, if the shots are going in, if they're turning you over, it's going to be up and down, and you're going to have a lot of points. If those things aren't happening, they're still a very good team, but it's going to be a very different style of game. And so I don't want to get distracted by that and say, oh, well, yeah, their last game against William & Mary went under by big numbers. What I'd rather look at is say, we've seen them hang a total around 180. And as we mentioned yesterday on the show, sometimes you get that 180 number. It's not that you can't go over or shouldn't go over. It's just that you need everything to go right to get to the 180s or 190s. And that game didn't go right for them. But when the total was one, in the mid 150s, everything did go right and it got into the 180s, but it didn't have to all go right because it only needed to get into the 160s to go over. And that's more what we have here. Now, again, Bucknell's pace, they don't want to play fast, but we talked about it all the time. If you've been watching us for any time now, you've heard us say that with regards to pace, it leans towards the team with more talent. it leans towards the home team and it leans towards faster pace asterisk, unless it's one of those bottom 4 teams that is just insanely disciplined and will not get sped up. Otherwise, it's more fun to play faster and teams get sped up a little bit. That's just kind of what the data indicates. And all 3 of those point towards a little bit faster pace. So the model's kind of putting all that together and saying, this is one of those that should be a little bit higher. We don't want to get carried away with the St. John's totals. And when those totals are up in the ones, I'm not sure we're going to be betting them over. But when the total's sitting here in the mid 150s, it makes sense to bet this over because you've got a 10 or 20% or whatever chance that St. John's just smokes this game in just one of those crazy high scoring games. So if you ignore those games, you don't even have to have it go over at half of them because you've got that kind of built-in starter booster pack, right? So yeah, if it doesn't play out like that, I think it is more likely to go under than over. But it's probably like 20% of the time St. John just does it all themselves with the pace and what they do. And then in the other 80%, it's probably 35 go over, and then our 20% from the other adds up to 55. I think there are enough net avenues is what I'm trying to say to get us over that some of them barely eke over, some of them fly over, but it doesn't really matter how we win. If we win by 1 point or 20 points, that adds up to a cumulative probability of going over that is a good bit over 50%. I think we're in the 55, 60% range of going over on this. That's why it's our grade A total of the day. The second thing I wanted to point out about this, other than just the comparison of totals for St. John's, is Bucknell has undershot sidelines performance by less than St. John's has overshot their performance. And so far we look at the results, again, Bucknell has been a team that on aggregate has been under what the market has thought and under what the model has thought specifically. But St. John's has been over what the model has thought by more than Bucknell has been under by. So if that's the case, then that would imply that maybe this is looking more like 161, 162 is where the number should be. So never know where the numbers need to go, but based off of what I'm seeing here, it looks like there's a lot of angles to come at it analytically to suggest this total should be closer to 160. So a number I would expect to get bet up. So get over 154.5 A grade. A grade here in the mid 150s. It gets into the upper 150s. Still think it's worth a play if it drops to a B grade. And if it starts approaching 160, that's when, of course, we've lost all the value and we would have to just pass. We're going to wrap us up late night out on the island special here. Best B-side, Arizona State at Hawaii. We're going to lay the 1.5 with Hawaii as a B grade. These two teams profile similarly, better defense than offense, similar pace. So I think this Hawaii wins this by an average of 3 points. A couple of things going on here. First off, big advantage at home for Hawaii. Real tough to travel out there to the island, right? So that's built into the model, of course. Arizona State has been underperforming on offense, but overperforming on defense. They've been a little bit of a lower scoring team, and their improvements on defense kind of offset the fact that the offense has really struggled. You can see that kind of in the rating there. Hawaii's offense, we never thought would be that good. And so on average, the model's been spot on their predicted totals, but their defense has been fantastic so far this season. And Sideline thinks it's the best unit on the court, and that can be the other difference maker besides the home court edge. Of course, that opening game against Oregon weren't playing very well in it, but that was also traveling to the mainland. And then when one of Oregon's better players went out, they made that furious comeback and took a lead even late in that game, which is really impressive. And then, of course, won their 4 games at home. And that's what we tend to expect from Hawaii. They're going to do a lot better at home than they are on the road, but that was a pretty strong performance once Oregon wasn't quite just clearly better than them. And Oregon, a much better team than Arizona State. So they're compared to that game, they're stepping down in class, and then the location change getting at Hawaii makes me think that Hawaii's got a really good chance to win this. Really, the 1.5. One is the least likely number you can win by in basketball until you get out into some of the double digits. Don't mind laying the 1.5 here. Would lay the 2 as well. Again, Sideline says they win by an average of 3. Don't want to lay more than that. Don't want to lay odds more than that. But laying the 1.5 or 2 makes a lot of sense. And if you can only lay 1, that's even better. That way you get the guarantee you can't lose if Hawaii wins, which is what we always like to. So Hawaii, our best B-side there to wrap us up on the island. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, more picks available on Patreon. A free pick most every day. I try to do one every single day. If you're with the sign up as a free member on Patreon, then you can get all the picks that we recommend for $10 a month. And then you can get all the grades for every single game, a SIA and a total, all the model information, everything for $19.99 a month. So please check that out if you have the ability to support the show and help us keep this going. We would appreciate that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Otherwise, that's all we got here. We'll be back with Cousin Jared for college basketball's Friday slate. See y'all then.